Good morning. This is Francisco Hansen, Director of VOQUZ Labs, your SAP licensing and contracting experts. And today we will talk about S/4HANA and what looks the perfect path to your optimal licensing landscape look like. I have today with me our Senior VP, Tony Weiss, who will support us in understanding how to get there. Hi, Tony.
Hey Francisco, hi everyone. Very good to see you virtually all again. Um, this is a topic we've spoken about a few times recently. It doesn't make it any less valuable. Today we're going to be honing in very much on the making sure you have the right licenses when you move to S/4HANA or when you move to RISE. Not making sure you have, you know, paid the right money, well, that definitely comes into it, but we're talking about making sure you have the right licensing. So let's get straight into it. And let me start off with you, Francisco, if that's okay. So what's the first thing? What's the first thing we need to do? The first thing you need to do is to understand your current situation. If you don't understand your current situation, and I think you'll agree, Francisco, in fact, I hope you agree, if you don't understand your current situation, then you have no chance of negotiating the best licensing for you in the future. So first things first, understand what you're using, understand what you're missing, understanding your shelfware, understanding everything else that's in your current environment, making sure you understand how much you're paying, making sure how much discount you had in the past. All these things come into play in understanding your current situation. And as I say, why is this so important? Because if you don't know what you have today, how can you possibly transition that and negotiate with SAP into what you need tomorrow? So number one, understand your current situation. What's next? So what we need to think about. Sorry, Francisco, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, understand that, and it finishes off with the costs. So understand what you have, what you're using out of this, and also understand the cost structure of it, which is sometimes hard when you don't have line item pricing. But you need to understand what parts of your contract make the biggest price components, right? Because you will focus on that in the next negotiation when it comes to S/4HANA or RISE. So understanding the price relevance of each component is important. So let's move to the next slide and see what else we want
Absolutely.
to understand. When we talk about those costs, what do we know today? We will get later on to about the user licenses, the engines. Shelfware is a very important thing because now is the moment to get rid of it. You are reshaping your contract. You want to understand what you're using, what you're not using, and this is your leverage. So right now, the shelfware, you want to get rid of it. You don't want to include it in the new contract, especially. So, but you will also have new products or new versions of the old products. Now, infrastructure and services, looking into that will be important to make a decision about RISE. RISE is now a composed offering of infrastructure, services, and software. If you want to compare RISE with what you have today, you also need to look into the infrastructure and the services that you have today. We will get into this in another webinar over the next months. So application managed services infrastructure, important. Now migration costs, it's self-explanatory, very relevant cost point for some clients. The ones who have small systems, fairly standard, little customization, maybe not the biggest issue, but some of the SAP users with some 5,000, 20,000 users have been customizing SAP over the last 20 years. So the migration now to a new product, to a new version of the product may be complex. And then return on investment, always underestimated. in the end, if I were your CFO, I would want to know why you are doing all of this. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have the last version of the software and guarantee security of the software, but what do we get in exchange for spending, I don't know, two, 10, $100 million in a new version of SAP? So let's look into that.
And it's something that many customers are struggling with. The business proposition is something that many IT departments, many people, many CTOs around the world are really struggling, going to their CFO and saying, we need to spend X million dollars to move to S/4HANA. And obviously the CFO says, why? What benefits do we get? And the CTO goes, well, because SAP says we have to. It's a very difficult conversation. So you're right, Francisco. All those infrastructure costs, all those technical areas. Everyone who's on the call, look out for our next webinar. We'll be looking into performance. We'll be looking into hardware. We'll be looking into infrastructure in our next webinar. But today, Francisco made a very crucial point. This is a once in a decade opportunity for you to right size your licensing, to right size your environment, to right size everything about your licensing environment and your future roadmap, and make sure you have everything in place for the next 10 years. It is an opportunity. It's not just a cost. It's not just forced upon you. If you handle it correctly, it's an opportunity to really get yourself in a good situation for the future. So how do we do it? So we use, you know us, we're VOQUZ Labs, we have samQ. So we have samQ, which is a licensing optimization tool, highly recommended, market leading. So when you want to know your current environment, samQ is the way to go. Make sure you understand what you're using, make sure you understand what you need, make sure it's fully optimized, and that's what we do with samQ. And Francisco, you're the visoryQ expert. Maybe you can compare.
Yeah, visoryQ is exactly about understanding the cost components. So where is the money going? Is it infrastructure? Is it services? Is it software? Is it infrastructure add-ons? Is it software as a service or maintenance costs? How much am I spending for services in opposite to software? So understanding the single components will give you, first of all, it will get you in control of the situation. It will make the situation comparable. You can't value a RISE with SAP proposal without analyzing services as they are today and infrastructure as it is today. And you need line item pricing. I'm sorry, and I know that SAP won't like to hear that because they have a clear policy of not publishing line item prices with RISE. This doesn't work. You need line item pricing to be able to value what you're buying. You need line item pricing to understand if you later on need more units of this or want to get rid of the other. How much am I changing in my contract? Is it 10%, 5%? You can't work a contract without line item pricing. What do you have to say about this, Tony? I think you have an interesting opinion about that too, right?
When we've spoken about this on many webinars in the past, it's in any negotiation, it's mandatory. This is not something that's nice to have. This is not something that you ask SAP nicely for. This is something that you say to SAP, if we don't have this, then we're not talking. It's as simple as that, in my opinion. I mean, if I were the CFO like you were a minute ago, I would not be buying my baked beans like in my last webinar, my scenario. I would not be buying my baked beans without knowing how much they cost. And I'm not going to be spending millions of dollars on licensing when I don't know how much they cost. It's just bizarre. Especially in the right situation where you have the infrastructure costs, you have the various different cost factors, and you still get one price, and you don't even know which the price is for which. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. It's not manageable.
So if anyone takes anyone away from these webinars that we're doing, if everything else you think is just nonsense, take away the fact that get line item pricing when you do your negotiations with SAP.
I
But
totally
coming back
agree.
to cost implications, the cost factors, obviously users, historically, you're professional, you're limited professional, logistics, blah, 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 in the ECC world. S/4HANA, professional, productivity, functional. In the FUE world, advanced core, self-service. So there's lots of different licensing changes, but whatever way you look at it, your user license is still a fundamental part of your licensing costs. So making sure that you buy the right licenses for what your users actually need may be number one when you think about your licensing costs.
I agree. So, and especially on RISE, now the full user equivalence, it's called full user equivalence, but it's much more than that. First of all, it's how you pay the ERP system. So not the line of business or engines, but it's how you pay the core of your ERP system. And then you have different discount tiers. So it's very price determining how many full user equivalents you buy. And it also determines how many servers you will get from SAP, how big the infrastructure is that you'll get. So the conversation becomes more complex. It's now understanding how many user licenses you need, what impact this has on the overall price because of the discount tiers. And then number three, how many servers are you getting? Because if you buy less full user equivalents, you will have to buy the servers extra on top of it, which may or may not be a good idea. So need to calculate that.
Yeah,
So,
so
but
for
let's move
everyone's
on to the
understanding,
other one.
there is
Oh,
t-shirt
sorry. Go on. Yes.
t-shirt pricing in the rise in the FUE world. It's based on the number of FUEs you have. So it's not just let's get the right number of FUEs and everything else falls into place. It's get the right number of FUEs and then oh my dear, what else fits into that? Lots, as you say, lots more to think about. But again, our next webinar, come back everybody, we'll be talking about that. Obviously, you know your users, you've managed to get those all optimized. Most SAP customers have been around, or a lot of SAP customers at least have been around for a decade or even decades. And over that time, they've made multiple purchases, multiple different licenses. How many of them they're still using, how many of them they're getting full functionality from, how many they're getting full value from. We see many situations, Francisco, where customers are getting very little value from a whole swathe of their existing licenses. As we said before, this is your opportunity to get rid of all that stuff, but also be aware that there is new functionality. There are new licenses in the S4 world and in the FUE world, in the RISE world, of course. So I know you have a lot to say on this one, Francisco, but essentially, just because you had something in your old ECC environment doesn't necessarily mean that you need it in the S4 environment. And if you do need it in the S4 environment, it doesn't mean to say that it's going to be exactly one for one on what you actually require. Any thoughts, Francisco?
No, I'm good. I think we are a bit late with the slides, so let's move on to the next one. I totally agree. I mean, understanding the components, optimize what you don't need, get rid of the shelfware. These are necessary steps in between, and you need to go through this. So this is a process. We are trying to describe how to get there in the most efficient way. You see about that. Now, the new products in S/4HANA, I see it also happening sometimes, not often, but it does happen. The clients do not get into the discussion of analyzing the new products. Now, HCM on ECC is not the same as the new version of human resources or human capital management for S/4HANA when it comes to functionality. The same goes for almost every project. SAP keeps on developing the projects, so they have new functionality, but eventually they also changed processes in the old version of it, so you need to be aware of it. You need to understand how far does it even fit the new process in my process. Does it work out? Then it has impact on the metrics change. Looking into many products, I was looking into the demand planning the other day. based on plans and users and things like that. Now it's based on revenue. So this may change the financial setup of my contract. And so it's about the functionality, it's about the costs, and it's about the metrics. Look in detail into those changes, because they will definitely have an impact to a certain extent.
And don't just take,
in your
just
company.
don't accept what SAP puts in their bomb to you either. You really need to investigate it for yourselves, I'm afraid to say. This slide, and I know we're running out of time already, but this slide gives just some of the different ways in which you can contract with SAP. The product conversion has sort of died, but if you started the product conversion path with SAP previously, that's something that you can possibly continue with. Contract conversion used to be the sort of most common way of moving to S4. It essentially creates the new bomb. So create a bomb for the future, create a bomb what you need. SAP will take as much money from you as you possibly can to get there, and you get rid of all of your old licenses and you start afresh. That was essentially the contract conversion. But of course, there's RISE nowadays as well, which has thrown a whole new permutation into it. But this, the one at the bottom here, the one that I'm pointing to, no one can see I'm pointing, the one that says wait until 2027, you'll be surprised, or possibly you won't be surprised, how many customers are doing this analysis with us and then saying, fine, we now know all of our options and we're going to stay. So not doing nothing, you need to analyze it. I think doing nothing is always a bad idea. But once you've done the analysis, deciding to stay as you are is certainly a valid option. And it's not one to dismiss completely.
Yep. And if I were to say, what is the core of this? The decision, the strategic decision, is not a product name. It is not a cloud hype. Being in the cloud in itself has no value at all. So the question is, where is the value? The value is in having a professional company managing my infrastructure, if I trust that they are able to do so. So eventually, if my systems are not right-sized on the cloud, I may be better off with with on-premise systems on my own data center. So proper performance on my own data center is better than bad performance on the cloud. So you need to really look into the details. It's about performance, it's about sizing, it's about pricing, and it's about functionality when it comes to the software and upgrading to a new version. So don't look at product names, don't look at generalistic indications. You need to get down to the details. And now this is our approach on how to get there. This is how we lead projects this days in helping clients getting in an efficient way to the best result. So we analyze utilization with samQ and plan with the simulations, the demand of licenses for the future. We analyze the client's contracts in terms of terms and conditions, pricing, discounts, product mix. We look into the demand and discuss the demand for the future with the clients, the functionality, the products that they will need. Then we start visualizing the financial scenarios that come out of it, but also looking deep down into the service setup, into the infrastructure setup, into the performance and sizing of the whole thing. And once we have all of this data and can visualize it with visoryQ, we are prepared to discuss strategy with the client and show him the different options that SAP has put on the table, the ones that don't come from SAP, help him preparing his negotiation, understanding where the core of the things are that he needs to discuss with SAP, and then hopefully helping get the best contract that he could get for his future environment. And that's the core of it, more or less.
Absolutely. I think we have one conclusion slide to go, but I say if we're going to blow our own trumpet just a little bit,
yeah.
I mean, obviously this is a financial scenario, real life financial scenario, which I believe you worked on, Francisco. So maybe you can quickly quickly?
Yeah, just very briefly. I mean, this is a real life scenario, and this is the difference between paying $1 million or $500,000 in software and services. And this scenario is it is so simple that it almost looks unreal, but it's a project that we did around half a year ago. And as you can see, just by right sizing the number of full user equivalents, the right amount of products in the cloud platform enterprise agreement, discussing the preferred success and the disaster recovery components that are based percentually as a percent of the rest of the products, we managed to halve the costs for the client. And this is not, we didn't negotiate any discounts here. We didn't get into price negotiations. It was all about the sizing and the discussion of the need of the client. How many users, what products, what product sets, what quantities. This was all that we did here. And as you can see, the result is fairly impressive and important for the client, because this is something you can multiply times the next 10 years he will be paying this amount. So pick
And this is not atypical. This is not an exception. This is something that we come across. These types of results happen all the time. And just to blow our trumpet a little bit again, remember that VOQUZ Labs deals with SAP all day, every day. So we're in front of SAP with negotiations. We see their tactics, we see their strategy, we see their pricing, we see everything they try to get from customers every day. So it puts us in a little bit of a privileged position, to be honest with you, Francisco, compared to the average customer who's trying to negotiate on their own with SAP. This one, basically,
this is an opposite scenario. So in this scenario, you can see that the client managed to really negotiate with SAP a fairly attractive RISE scenario. So it was I must admit, a fairly simple client in terms of his setup of products and infrastructure, etc. But in his particular case, he had such an oversized infrastructure with high costs today, high service costs, etc. The contract that he had was oversized, so this can be a result too. Sometimes RISE is the best option for some clients. So look into your particular situation. There is not a one-for-all answer about this, and this is what we want you to understand. So maybe summing up what Tony said before, take the idea of the line item pricing. Take the idea of getting a transparent picture of all the cost components. Take the idea of analyzing things in detail. We can help you with that. We have the methodology, the tools to get you there as quickly as possible, and make sure that your future SAP is even much better than what you have today. And this is what this is all about: getting return on investment in what you invest with us, getting the best contracts possible. What else, Tony? Anything that I haven't thought of?
No, this is what we do. So this is why we exist as a company. This is why you and I have jobs. So I'm sure that everyone who's on the call will have lots of questions, and so we very much look forward to answering them. So
let's turn over to the Q&A session now. Thank you very much, Tony, for your contribution. Very interesting things I think we've heard today.
And more importantly, thank you for everyone else who's here. So see you at the Q&A.
Here we are. Thanks for staying, Tony. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Before we hit it off with a question, I suggest we go through a short poll just to see where you guys stand on S/4HANA and the topic and cleaning up your licensing landscape. For that, I'm going to turn off the cams again, so we have that in the recording as well. You see your results. No worries regarding compliance. It's anonymous, so no names are displayed. No source of the question is displayed. And I'll hit it off. Give me a second to start it. Okay. So first question, is the decision whether to migrate to S/4HANA a priority for your company in 2024 or 2025? So within the next, within this year and the next year? I'll leave the question open for another 10 seconds. I'm curious about the results and your comment on it, Tony. So I still see people answering and the poll is still moving. Closing in 3 seconds from now. Okay. Closing the question. And let's have a look at the results. Okay, 63% of you say yes, and 38% are still relaxed. Is it still worth being relaxed? I mean, 2027 is far away, and then again, it isn't. What do you think, Tony?
I still think it's worth having it as a consideration, definitely. I mean, as you know, most customers we're talking to, by definition, are making this, going through the decision-making process anyway. Whether or not they intend to act upon the information they gather is a different situation completely. But not doing anything for the next couple of years and waiting to see what happens is a valid option for many customers. This finding resonates with me. I know that the majority of customers are absolutely thinking about it, but the way in which we've phrased the question now is making the decision a priority. So making the decision to move to S/4HANA at some stage may be a priority for customers, but in the next couple of years, I think this feedback is matches what we see on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, let's jump to the next one. Let me select that one here. You should be able to see it in a second. Were you aware that a clean license landscape has a massive impact on the costs of your S/4HANA migration? Were you aware that a clean license landscape has a massive impact on the cost of your S/4HANA migration? The potential one, at least, or your SAP system? I'll leave that open. I still see answers coming in. Okay, closing in 2 seconds. Closing now. And let's have a look at the results. Okay, that sounds quite good actually. 73% think say, yeah, we are aware that we need to tidy up before we move over. Would you say that reflects every region, Tony?
No, I think it reflects the people who join their webinars. If you know, obviously you know. If you don't know, you don't know. The interesting thing is that there's 27% of people who say that they weren't aware of that implication and they've joined this call. So obviously those 27% are now aware that there's a massive implication. We are trying to get the message out to 100% of SAP customers that this is something they need to consider. So it's good to see that 73% of people know. I'm pleased that 27% more people know now.
Yeah, especially if they read the announcement of the webinar, as you say, so they might have been aware before that. Yeah, you're right. Let's see. Let's jump to the next one. I'm gonna select. It's the 3rd out of 4, so we're almost through. And he goes, do you think STAR gives you an overview of correct licensing? So being properly licensed, under licensed, or over licensed? Do you think STAR gives you that overview? See the answers coming in. I'll leave this open again for a couple of more seconds. Because there seems to be a very different perception of what people think STAR can do and what it can't do. So That might be interesting to see whether people stand on that. So closing the poll into, no, it's still moving. Some answers are coming in after a short break. Now it's going to still stand. Closing the question in 2 seconds. And displaying the results now. Okay, what do you think, Tony? 40% think, yeah, that's all I need.
I think there's a healthy degree of cynicism in the answer to this one. So we've touched on this on previous webinars about the limitations of using star for licensing, because there's so many different factors at play, particularly around the authorization concept, that make star somewhat unreliable if you're going to use it as the baseline for your licensing. So it's as I say, we've spoken about star previously. It's not a bad tool. It's easy to use. It's easy to install. It does give you results, with the big caveat that you need to make sure that you understand your usage requirements and you understand what your current authorization concepts, how those are influencing the star results. So if you have your authorizations completely under control, if they absolutely map to your usage requirements, if you have no other permutations happening in your system, then possibly star is a place to be. I know very few customers who would be in that situation, to be perfectly honest with you.
Could you say that it's a good snapshot tool, but maybe not necessarily something that actually gives you background information if you don't already know it or have it or check it in a different way?
It does give you a snapshot of your current situation based on authorizations, but it doesn't do it based on what you actually need.
What you need.
So what users actually need. So you need to understand what your requirements are before you run star. Otherwise, star doesn't do what it's designed to do, because it's basing its findings on flawed information.
That's already there. Get it. Let's jump to the last one in the poll. And you should see it in a moment. Here we go. Yeah. Would you like to get an overview of your migration options and the associated costs before you make a decision? I would expect it. I mean, I'm looking at the answers coming in. I would expect this to be 100% answer. Let's see. And maybe then find out how we can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So, oh, okay, there is a small surprise here. Closing the poll in 2 seconds from now. Closing now, and let's have a look at the results, which I think is almost funny. Maybe it was meant in a funny way. So 90% yes, 10% no, not really.
I'd be interested to understand the logic behind saying no. But as I say, it's not a wrong. There's no right or wrong answer. But obviously, we believe that the best approach is to understand the costs and understand all the ramifications of moving to RISE or S/4HANA before you make the decision. Otherwise, you're letting SAP dictate it for you. So interesting that someone or some people think that's not the best way to go, but would be interesting to understand the logic behind it.
Will be interesting to follow up then on that one. Okay, thanks very much. I'm gonna close the poll now. Thanks for participating. I think it was quite an interesting insight. I'm gonna turn on our cameras, Tony, for the Q&A session now.
Sure.
And let's have a look at what came in.
I don't think we have many questions today by the looks of it.
Yeah, I would say we're two sources. I'm just looking at both. Multitasking is not my strongest.
I can see 3 questions.
Yeah, and I see 4 in the other one on the email coming in. Let's start with the first one. Someone's interested in this topic, so thanks for that. Well, the question is, what options do customers have without embarking on a major transformation journey now? Can we extend the compatibility pack to the end of the ECC mainstream maintenance period?
Yeah, the compatibility pack question is an interesting one, because obviously there's something in your contract which defines your next steps. I mean, obviously depends. Unfortunately, this is one of the it depends answers. It depends upon your situation. It depends upon your leverage. It depends upon how much control you have over SAP. It depends upon your migration path. It depends upon the conversations you're having. You need to really look into that and engage either with a third party who understands, or, and I hate to say it, or with SAP, which is always running the risk that they'll say no, and then you sort of force their hand into doing something. So the person who asked that question, I'd be very interested to know what your particular situation is. So as we've mentioned many times before, we do follow up. We do follow up on these questions one-on-one. So I'll make sure that we follow up with this one directly with you so that I can better understand your personal situation, if that's okay.
Well, it's good that you're giving out some sort of a mind map saying it's a depends question, and these are the factors you should think of before you sort of find the right answer. So good enough. Jump into the next one. I'm reading out as it is. Let's assume we face a customer who has already optimized SAP infrastructure on Microsoft Azure. Have you seen a customer failing in this category where moving to RISE actually brought them a commercial advantage? What motivates MS to offer vouchers?
I think falling into category rather than failing. Well, one
right, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
The answer is yes. Yeah. So we have seen customers who are already on a hyperscaler moving to a RISE scenario. Of course, there are different factors at play here. You know, how much does it make to your negotiation strategy with Microsoft or whoever you're with, whether it be with Amazon or Google? Now, if you move a major platform out of your direct contract with the hyperscaler, how much difference does it make in your other areas of business that you do with them? The answer is yes, we've seen it though. It's just one of those factors you need to take into account. And this comes back again to the line item pricing conversation, because unless SAP tells you how much you're going to be paying for your hyperscaler costs, how do you make that comparison to what you're paying with Microsoft today? The interesting question of what motivates Microsoft to offer vouchers, Microsoft wants to sell Azure. And I've spoken to Microsoft sales guys, and it depends upon what side of the business they're on. They either love the idea of vouchers or they hate the idea of vouchers. Depends on whether they're compensated by dealing directly with customers or by selling RISE. And I also don't know, and without wishing to be too flippant, I don't know the compensation model between SAP and Microsoft. I don't know what incentives they have in place between the two organizations to actually take into consideration when offering these vouchers. But
okay,
yes, the answer to the basic question, yes, we have seen customers who are already on a hyperscaler move to RISE. And remember that if you're with a hyperscaler, you still have access to your license. You still have access to your software, to your environment. You're still essentially on an on-premise licensing model if you're with a hyperscaler. Moving to RISE, of course, puts you on a subscription licensing model.
Thanks for that, Tony. I'm going to jump to the next one, making sure I read it out correctly. We plan to sweat the ECC assets through to 2029 to upgrade in time for 2030. We will buy extended maintenance. Do you see a problem with that strategy?
Other than the additional cost for your extended maintenance, at this stage, it's a valid consideration. You would not be the only customer in the world to make this decision. There's plenty of customers out there who are willing to wait and see how RISE goes. For other customers, there are obviously different considerations. They have a cloud policy, or they have rationale, they have reasons to move to S/4HANA, either from a business case or functionality, or some other reason. But if you have a stable ECC environment, you're getting from it exactly what you need, and you cannot build your internal business case to move to S4 or RISE, then yeah, why don't? It's a consideration to let other people test it first and learn from their mistakes. I don't really see too much risk, with the caveat it depends on your business's requirements.
Thanks. Moving to the next one, a simple, clear one. Is it possible to migrate HCM directly to S4, to H4 S4?
Not really related to our conversation today, but the HCM concerns are manifold. I'll reach out to this person directly on this one.
Excellent, thank you. Moving over to the ones that came in via email, and there is one restriction, what can I do when I have moved already? So can I also tidy up my licenses after I have moved to S4HANA?
Okay, this is an interesting question, of course. Now, if you're moving to S4HANA on-premise, then you still have an S4HANA perpetual licensing model. And I think we're all aware how difficult it is to right-size your S4 or your ECC or your perpetual licensing model once you're locked in. So there are inherent difficulties when dealing with SAP to change your licensing, to get rid of shelfware and things like that. Same for in the RISE world. Obviously, you're locked in for a fixed term for the duration of the subscription. And then theoretically, of course, you should be able to renegotiate your contract when it comes to the end of the term. We are already seeing customers facing difficulties in trying to reduce their spend when they get to the end of the subscription term. It's something you need to be prepared for when you get to that negotiation. Waiting to 2 weeks before your subscription expires, before you start negotiating with SAP, would definitely be a mistake. So I have to say, this comes back to what we said in the webinar. We should be, when you're considering moving to S4, whether it's a contract conversion, whether it's a moving to RISE, the preparation is key to your success. If you move stuff that is rubbish in your ECC environment and you move it to an S4HANA environment, it's unfortunately still rubbish. And you still have the problems of dealing with SAP to get rid of it. You still need a next event to bring SAP to the table to give you the opportunity to do that. So the bottom line is, take the opportunity. If you've made the decision to move and spend, take the opportunity to right size during the negotiation.
Thank you.
Is my recommendation.
The next one is about comparing different scenarios. Is that how long does it take to get results from visoryQ, and what do we have to prepare for it?
6 to 8 weeks would be sort of an average lifespan of a visoryQ project. It obviously, again, depends on the complexity of the environment, but I think 6 to 8 weeks would be a reasonable rule of thumb. The basic things we need, of course, are the BOM, to understand your current contract, ideally to have a proposal from SAP regarding their new BOM, although we can build that for ourselves if we need to. We have lots of conversations around, we understand infrastructure costs, of course, but we wouldn't know what your AMS costs are like. So there are things that we need to gather from the customer to put into our analysis. But once we have the information, we are the ones who do all the donkey work. We're the ones who put everything together. We are the ones who give you the visual results and the recommendations and the TCO analysis. Yeah, so yeah, there are certain inputs from the customer, and then we do all the work with that.
If you want to say what visoryQ looks like in terms of a demo, obviously talk to us. But beforehand, you can get a small overview by watching the video on it. So come back to our website, have a look at it.
I was going to say, yes, we do a demo.
Yeah. Yeah, this is just a hint out there. So just people prefer to get information before they actually get in contact. If you do so, please just go over to our website. We have a visoryQ intro video on the top level that explains what it does. This is basically Tony went into more detail now, but it goes into detail what it actually what it does and what happens in the background. But if you want to see the actual surface, the actual interface, the demo part is at the end of the video we're going to share.
I think that comes into our sort of corporate philosophy as well, Stefan. We always try to prove that we're going to bring value to customers even before they buy. So this is the same. If you need us to show you stuff, we are more than happy to do it.
Yeah, so transparency and then you know who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with. And exactly. When it comes to that, actually, this leads to my last question that I have here. Let me just check on the other level if there's anything else. No. Yeah, this comes back to what we just said. Where and how can I see whether your license check tool, so referring to samQ obviously, works for me?
We have a QLA, a quick license assessment, exactly the same philosophy we spoke about 2 seconds ago. If you need us to show you, we are more than happy to show you. So just reach out to any of us, and yeah, away we go. It's very, very quick, very, very easy to do, and it works. And we're happy to show you that it works.
We're through with the questions. Thanks, Tony, for giving in-depth answers people can actually that are useful, to put it that way. And if you want to if any question turns up after this webinar, just after letting it sink in, you're going to receive a recording for this. If you want to share it with your colleagues, you can obviously reach out to us directly, either via labs@voquuzlabs.com. Most of our team is on LinkedIn as well, if you prefer that way of communication. What way ever you choose to get in contact with us to get the right answers, please do so. You can. And from my side, thanks for joining, Tony.
No, again, thanks to everyone. Just to reiterate what Stefan said, if we said we'd get back to you directly, we will. Please join us for the next webinar where we'll be talking about the other implications, the more technical performance implications of moving to RISE. But until then, thank you very much again, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.